Brittany.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. I've got some peppermint hot cocoa here with my Santa.
With your black Santa Claus. I love it.
There are some spaces that still value diversity, and my home happens to be one of them.
There
So,
you go. Which is
Mhm.
reminding me of that recent controversy with the Boots commercial
Yes.
with the actress from Bridgerton. I can't remember her name right now, but she's playing Mrs. Claus. And I thought it was a great commercial. It was,
Yeah.
commercial for
Yeah.
the boots she had on, right? Like a shoe commercial.
Right.
And people were up in arms that there was a black Mrs. Claus. Never mind the fact that Santa Claus was still white in the commercial.
Interesting. They
Yeah.
don't
So
want, Santa doesn't have the freedom to choose whom he loves.
I guess not. And
Hmm.
you know what? Here's the thing. I think there can be white Santa, black Santa, green Santa, purple
Yeah,
Santa.
I
Okay?
agree.
Because children are not listening to this. Santa isn't real.
Correct. Wait, what? He's not? Children aren't listening, but Mina is. So
Oh, sorry,
I'll
Mina.
cover her ears. There we go.
Sorry, Mina. But our imagination is free to run wild. So it doesn't
That's
have
the
to be
best part about having an imagination is there are no rules.
exactly.
Santa
Exactly.
can be whoever. And I agree with you. I love the idea of having Santa reflect your own ethnic background, So here in the Philippines, you should have a Filipino Santa. What's wrong with that?
It's perfectly okay. Okay.
You know?
Now, if Santa is real and wants to come to town, right?
Mhm.
And be like, hey, this is my address for real, right? You can find me here. This is my family. Then, I've been doing this for, I don't know, hundreds of years. I think people will be more focused on how he's lived so long. All right.
Correct. We might want we might want to follow his skincare regimen,
Exactly. Rather
understand what
than
he's
the color
eating.
of his skin. Okay.
Right.
So, anyway, super interesting. I also
Very
saw this weird
interesting.
movie, but I'll talk to you about the weird movie later.
Okay.
But so this week, a new ruling came down. So we have been seeing,
Wow.
week after week after week, this, I guess it's, we can definitely call it a backlash against diversity, equity, inclusion. And just, it keeps spiraling
Yes.
in a negative direction. So,
We need like a sound for every time there's like some
we
sort of
have sounds on
DEI
here.
policy that gets,
You're gonna find a sound. We have sounds on here, okay?
Yes. Yes. It's
But
true.
well, maybe next time.
Uh-huh.
But the U.S. Appeals Court, I think it's
Hmm.
in New Orleans, they rejected Nasdaq's diversity rules for company boards.
I saw that. And
So,
before we get into it, I just
mhm,
want to reiterate why it is so critically important for executive leaders, specifically the president, to appoint federal judges in
mhm,
different circuits around the country, because if you are, again, a lot of these federal judges, they're tenured, right? These
yep.
can be lifetime appointments. And so you want to ensure that your specific policy, and by extension, your perception of America, what it should be, what we're working toward, is protected.
And that's absolutely right. And that's actually, one of the things that the Republicans in specific, that's part of their long game, right? So even when Trump was president before, right, all the antics to me was a mere distraction from everything going on a day-to-day level, which was shoring up the judicial system with judges that might have a particular point of view. And so, just as you said, they have these long tenures. And they may or may not, be, um, amicable to, DEI in its original form.
Right.
And so then we see decisions like this, trickling down, especially since the Supreme Court um, set aside affirmative action rules, right? We've seen that reaction to what happens next.
Right.
So, this is to me like a big deal, right? Just for a little background, I think it was in 2020, but Nasdaq put together a proposal that was approved by the SEC, which basically asked, huge corporations, I think they were on the Russell 3000, I think, to ensure that their boards included at least one woman and at least one person who represents an underrepresented group or LGBTQ, right? So basically, in their words, like 2 diverse board members. And if they
Okay.
didn't, they needed to explain why not.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'd be kicked off. They could be kicked off the exchange. So
Interesting.
yeah, right. It's like the ultimate accountability. So okay, you don't do it, but why? And there has to be a
Right.
reasonable explanation. And I'm sure they're, from a board perspective, in terms of their documentation, they would have to show, what steps they went through to secure these board seats, who they interviewed, like all the details to show that it just wasn't possible to obtain the necessary skill sets to fill whatever gaps or needs were required for the board.
Right.
And
And
I'm sure that's a difficult thing to do, but also
for
necessary.
sure. For sure. And I guess I'm also just thinking really kind of about the rationale behind this, which is when left to their own devices, we understand that these business leaders are not going to do this on their own.
Right.
As much as we may want them to, as good as it can be for business, we recognize that it's not something that people are doing on their own. And so there's an effort to create requirements to incentivize people to move forward. And this isn't unique in American history because, we had integration, right? We've seen time and time again that unfortunately we need a little bit of a legislative push.
Yeah, on all subjects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, at the end of the day, all businesses want to be profitable, right? And
Right.
so it's about their vision of how profitability will be obtained. And that vision, historically has been, white males, right? That's how the system has been set up. So I think it's hard for organizations that have these margins that they have to make every single year and responsibilities to their stakeholders and their investors to focus on things that they may not feel are a direct line to profitability.
Yeah.
Although, that has been proven in many different ways. So, for example, in the original proposal, NASDAQ cited a report from the Carlyle Group, which is an investment company, that having at least 2 diverse board members have nearly 12%, companies that have nearly 12% more earnings growth per year than the average
Wow.
companies that lack diversity.
Yeah.
12% growth is significant. Significant gains.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I would never say no to a 12% increase in my business.
Right, exactly. And that was back in 2020. So it's a little shocking, right? And outside of the earnings, which I know that's the most important thing, right? But outside
Right.
of that, it just kind of shocks me that today, people in any business don't think that it's important to be reflective of the broader community, right? Women
Right.
are half the population, right? At the very least, why aren't there more women on boards,
Right.
right? At the very least. And then of course we add in the different, I don't want to call us minorities because we're becoming a majority, right? Right. So
We'll come back to that in a moment because I have a very interesting stat for you. But
yeah. Okay, good. All right. But why non-white groups are not part of shouldn't be part of the equation. And so
yeah.
it just in general, from just an intellectual perspective, it just still boggles my mind. I know we've talked about this, but I just can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah. And I have to say, so when I started in law school, as you know, your law school summers are really important. My first summer, I started at a financial services firm.
Mm.
And one of the things that I had to do was scour the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and draft an insider trading primer for my supervisors.
No, interesting.
So this is very interesting to come at it from this perspective. And so at least the judges are saying that these rules don't further the Exchange Act because the Exchange Act exists, as they quote, primarily to protect investors and the macroeconomy from speculative, manipulative, and fraudulent practices, and to promote competition in the market for securities transactions.
Mm-hmm.
It is fascinating that they, knowing the data that you just shared, see this as an obstructionist,
Mm.
take when we know that this is going to promote competition in the market, right? If we see that businesses are more successful. I'm trying to reason with that. And again, for people who I am assuming that these judges at least have a conservative slant. But again, conservatives are about limited government, ostensibly,
Right.
right? Small government. And so this, at least the judges who dissented, and this is a 9-8 opinion, right? It was very close.
Right.
But they're saying that the court is overstepping its authority because Nasdaq is a limited liability. It's private,
Right.
right? It is one thing if there is a public organization that you can appeal to, but for these private organizations, we should be very concerned about being overbroad, right? And dictating what is and is not appropriate for private organizations to, how they choose to run their businesses and what they choose to require of the companies that interact with them.
I agree. That's totally another reason why it's shocking. And how will this have an effect on other, things that companies require in order to engage businesses, right? That are meaningful to their business in order for them to remain profitable, right? So
Correct.
it just seems could have a snowball effect. Now, I know this is going to be appealed and all that good stuff, but um, it's I feel like it's very short-sighted from
Mm-hmm.
that perspective, um, because of the domino implications that this could have,
Right.
right? And again, just unpacking that definition, right, around competition and fraud, like, of course, it depends on every organization, right, what those words mean. But what we find in some places, let's say like banking, right, there could be fraudulent practices against the consumers that may disproportionately affect underrepresented groups, right?
Correct.
And so, assuming none of that is intentional, right? When you have a diverse board, they can surface some of these things based on their experiences. And when you surface some of these things, sometimes it's not like this big aha, right? It
Mhm.
is a small action that leads to another action that leads to another action. So it can go unnoticed for a very long time,
Right.
but it's that one person that's like, hey, you know what? This thing happens, right, in this community, or it happens to me, right?
Right.
And it can have a negative effect that has um, larger implications for families.
Right.
Maybe we should explore that from this business angle and see if there's something that we could change in
Yeah.
our practices that either doesn't cost us any money, or it's a
Hmm.
minimal cost because it's an investment in the community or the greater good, or it actually makes us more profitable by changing a couple steps in our process, right?
Right.
And it's that thoughtful analysis that comes from people and people's experiences that can make your organization more consumer friendly in some cases. And so obviously we weren't in the courthouse right,
Yeah.
to hear these arguments, but from my layperson's perspective, you know, I don't understand how something like this doesn't detracts from the definition of what Nasdaq or the Nasdaq and the SEC rules, combined, what they're supposed to mean for organization.
Absolutely. Um, can I ask you some marketing questions?
Yeah,
How important is marketing in business
I think
growth?
it's the cornerstone of all business. But I, from my perspective, honestly, it's at the end of the day, it's about the brand, right? And marketing is the steward of the brand, right? And that brand incorporates messaging and how we go out to the world and how we relate to our customers or buyers, depending on B2B, B2C, or whatever. And it's your persona. It's how people perceive you. So at the end of the day, I think that it is the primary function, although sometimes it's not seen that way.
Okay. And is it beneficial to try to keep up to date with your target market in terms of demographics, consumer behavior, that type of stuff?
Absolutely. Your current and your target, the ones you have and the ones you want.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
extremely imperative.
So I know it seems like I'm cross-examining you a little bit. I'm coming with the leading questions.
No, I know you.
Uh,
I know you.
and can you explain to those who may be listening and aren't aware, can you explain what Nielsen's is?
Oh, it's basically it's a measurement organization that really tests consumer interactions with you, right? So I think the most traditional form of that is with, say, television, right? Who's
Mhm.
watching? How long are they watching? And those data points are used to basically secure advertising, more advertising dollars. Because if I can prove that 52 million people are watching this show, right, that has
Right.
value to the advertisers who want that reach. But it also is used across digital media as well.
Okay. Are they, and I understand this may be kind of a biased question, but are they relatively relied upon? Do they have a pretty good reputation throughout the market?
I think they have an excellent reputation throughout the market. I think it has uh, changed over time, right?
Sure.
Um, because of the nature of media,
Sure.
right? So, whereas in my view, and also
Mhm.
just as a caveat, I'm more B2B than B2C, which is where
Yep.
I see Nielsen mostly playing. But um, people can measure for themselves using different technologies and stuff and get a more accurate point of view. I think Nielsen does now provide more in-depth and detailed data than they did, say, back in the day when you had to have
I
like
see.
top boxes and things like that. But
Sure.
it's just a different way to leverage them now.
I asked because I attended a presentation led by an executive at Nielsen, just unrelated. But what I saw was that minorities, or at least the global majority, account for 100% of US population growth since 2010.
Damn.
That shocked me. So Hispanic Americans account for 54% of US population growth since 2010. Asians, about 23%. Black Americans at 17%. And non-Hispanic white population declined slightly from 2010 to about 2022. And then, of course, when it comes to people who identify as biracial or multiracial, about 42% of the part of the population growth. That shocked me.
Wait, this is since when? Since 2022?
So minorities account for 100% of US population growth since 2010.
2010. Okay. 2010. That
That,
is, those numbers are incredible. They're not necessarily shocking. And I'll just tell you this little story.
okay.
How long ago was this? My son is 21. So maybe 10 years. Yeah, maybe 10 years ago. Something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was going to school and uh, DEI, in a way, I don't think it was really called that, was starting to emerge, right, as a topic for the school. And they brought in some consultants to talk about this and how we could, be more inclusive and things of that nature. And I remember I was part of the Parents Association. I didn't see the slide prior to the small group presentation. There's going to be a small group and then a larger group presentation, but I didn't see the slides. But one of the slides talked about the US population, and the data showed something similar, not said exactly that way, but basically said, the world is browning, okay? And it will be brown, all the way brown, okay,
Right.
by 2030. It was either 2030 or 2040, but I
Interesting.
think it was something like that.
Okay.
And again, there's like 10, 12 years, something like that. And the school was majority white, parents. And I remember saying to myself, probably shouldn't have put that slide in because the parents, the small group that was in there, lost their minds. There was too
Really?
shocking of a statistic for them to hear because it would be the first time that they were hearing it.
Right.
They weren't eased into the fact that their group was, becoming a minority essentially.
Sure.
And so it's not shocking to me, but I mean, it's not shocking because I knew it was coming for a very long time.
Right.
But to hear the numbers is like, whoa, okay. Right?
Exactly. And so I bring all of that up. I laid the foundation to share that stat to reinforce that for these organizations, that choose to be listed on Nasdaq and choose to interact with Nasdaq is seeking to reflect the changing of the tide.
Right.
They're seeking to continue to be relevant, and in so doing, incentivizing businesses that also want to seek to continue to be relevant.
Agreed. It was a good and bold move for the times,
Yeah.
But it's suffering at this point. And so I think kind of like we talked about, companies will have to reinvent how they approach this subject.
Right.
Because like you said in the beginning, we wouldn't need this if people were just going to do it on their own without needing to be incentivized.
Right.
Right? And I don't know if this is really an incentive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's
it's
like
more. Hmm.
mandate,
Exactly. Exactly.
or else,
Implementing punitive, right.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and it's interesting why they even took that tact. I'm sure that there were conversations about this prior to, and it was determined that they had to mandate it in order to get people to comply. And it's interesting, they're only asking for two people. They didn't
Right,
say 50% of your boards, right?
right,
They said two people. And one of which, again, is a woman, which should just be a
correct,
given. I'm not
correct,
saying the others shouldn't be a given, but I'm just saying, like, well, damn, right?
right.
And so, really, at the end of the day, you're asking your bigger shift around race, which is a harder thing for people to do, right? Is one person, because I don't understand why women are a problem. And look, I don't know how the math works for this, right? Like, if you had a black woman, could you check your box? I don't
Right.
know.
I was thinking, a black gay woman or a black lesbian woman, right? Could she then?
Right. I
We
don't
did
know how
it.
that works. Okay, I don't know how that works. But hey, I'm sure they would have found some ways to work it out, right? In the
Exactly.
explanation, in the notes. Um, but it's scary though. It actually is scary to see something like this. And I'm really interested in how companies are going to approach it. Now, that's not saying that some companies weren't going to do this anyway, right?
Right.
Like, this is the mandate. They weren't even worried about it, right?
Right.
They're like, this is part of our culture, regardless, and we want
Right.
to roll
From
it
the top
out.
down.
So I'm sure there's a good portion of companies where that is already part of their calculus, and this is a non-factor. It's probably meant for the ones that are egregious
Mm.
historically, and now there'll be no accountability towards it, and we as consumers just have to, I guess, just be aware. It's really hard, I get how it's really hard to follow these things because that's really on a macro level. Like, consumers deal with stuff their day to day, like, Walmart, throwing out their DEI policies. There's large swaths of people that rely on Walmart's affordability for food and goods,
Yep.
right? That can't just easily make the switch to Target, right?
Yes.
Um, so I get it. It's hard, and I think they know that, right? There may be like a dip for a minute, but eventually people will swing back up, right? I'm outraged right now from the fact that there's no ginger in ginger ale. And there's some lawsuit with Canada Dry or something. Supposedly.
I know
There's
it
all
is
these-
very,
I don't know. I don't know if it's
it's
real.
very upsetting to me. As someone who loves ginger ale.
I love ginger ale, right? This is my thing. And I'm like, it's the only soda I drink. And so in the supermarket yesterday, and I'm like, well, maybe I should just try ginger beer. There's a brand that my friend has. I need to find it. Um, but I ended up buying ginger ale because I didn't see the brand that I liked. I'm like,
Now I'm very curious to know the brand. We can discuss offline, but
yes,
I would love to know the brand because there's one brand that is a cultural staple within the Black American community.
so
So,
anyway, um, so anyway, just to say, it's kind of hard to execute, and this is in the in terms of boycotts and things of that nature. It's
right.
hard to sustain that on a long-term basis, um, and I think the companies know that, and so we're in weird times, Brittany.
We're
Weird
in
times.
weird times. I mean, I am more so concerned about our ability to compete and perform on a world stage because
Mm,
we're in a global market now. I would even have we our podcast, the country outside of the United States that listens most to us is Germany. So to hello to people in Germany who are listening. Followed by Canada and the UK and Sweden. So that for me is fascinating. It's exciting. And at the same time, knowing that if our podcast is, on a world stage, all of these other companies, listed have to compete and perform globally. How are we, from a legislative and a judicial level, how are we hindering American progress, American success, and American business performance on a global scale? And by American, of course, I mean the United States, but
I agree with you. I mean, look, just start inside your organization. If you're a global organization, you have employees everywhere, and
right.
they're more than likely outside of the US, more diverse, depending on where you are, right? Like, and depending on your definition of diversity. But culturally, you have to be savvy to, create a work environment where people are happy and are innovative and, engaging with your customers in a meaningful way that's going to create loyalty and sustainability for your company. And so, again, it's just kind of shocking to think that there are organizations out there that don't think in that way. Like, I need a board that's reflective of my global footprint.
Right.
Right. So I don't know, but what do I know? Okay.
A whole lot, Karen. A whole lot.
To me. All right. And by the way, I just want to emphasize, like, I know this stuff isn't easy, right? It's easy to talk about, but it's very difficult to execute. And there's so many different layers, on an organizational level, on a board level, right? So many different layers, but it's not insurmountable. It just takes, diligence and a strong desire to make it happen, right? And CEOs and boards are very smart people. They can get it done.
They can get it done.
They can get it done. And if boards mandate it to their CEOs, if boards model the behavior in how they select their members, their board members, and and they mandate it to their CEOs and they hold them accountable, then you have a really strong trickle down effect. But if you don't, then you won't.
Exactly.
Well, I think we're going to be talking about this more, unfortunately.
Yes.
And we'll continue to try to give you insights on how to navigate on what you should and should not be doing. And I don't know, we'll just ride this wave together.
All we can do.
All right.
I
didn't see Mina today.
She's here. She's napping, but
Hi,
she's
Mina.
got a little bit of lap head. I don't know.
But her eyes are wide open.
Yes, her eyes are wide open. So she says hello.
Yeah, I talk about the good stuff with Mina.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, we'll see you next time, Brittany. Bye, Mina.
See ya. Bye.